My name is Rishi. I am originally from the state of Jammu and Kashmir. I have been interested in conservation, or rather I would say nature, right from my childhood. And that interest sort of helped me understand what I wanted to do in life. And that kind of led to several things which have landed me here today where I am. So currently, I am leading the snow leopard conservation program at WWF India and WWF International. So my background is mainly ecology and wildlife science. I have done my master's at the Wildlife Institute of India in Dehradun, and then a PhD in wildlife science, where I mainly worked on snow leopards in Spiti Valley in Himachal. So I have around 15 years of experience working on large carnivores, mainly tigers and now snow leopards for the past 7-8 years. And I am obviously very interested in the Himalayas because they are unique. They are a very rich and fragile ecosystem. So that's of huge interest to me, and that's one area where I have interest and where I would like to continue working in future. And coming to snow leopards now, why snow leopards? That could be one question that you could ask. So, Himalayas are a unique mountain. They are still young and growing, and that kind of makes them also a little fragile compared to other mountain systems. And if you look at snow leopards are more like an emblem or an umbrella for the high altitude systems. When I say high altitudes, I mean Himalayan region. If you look at the Western Himalayan part, the Himalayan region, which is above 3,000 meters in the Western Himalayas and above 3,500 meters in the Eastern Himalayas. Now, this region above 3,500 meters or 3,000 meters in the Western Himalayas is a region which is very unique. And it's very stark, and you can immediately notice and see how distinct this region is by the fact that this is a tree-less landscape. So there are no trees in this region. You do find vegetation, but that's typical steppe vegetation, devoid of trees. But and to a sort of untrained eye, it looks like it's also referred to as a cold desert. And to an untrained eye, it looks like vast areas, vast expanse of beautiful, stunning landscapes, but which are perhaps devoid of life. You only need to look closer to see that these systems are really rich, exceptionally rich, and several species have evolved to live in these kind of environments. So what makes this system unique? So obviously the typical biogeographic features of this region are very different. High elevations, very low oxygen, the temperatures in winters can go down to minus 40 degrees below zero, and you get good amount of snowfall, and for a better part of a year the region is covered with snow, and much of the areas in this region are actually cut off from the rest of the country because of snowfall. Uh, and and the fact that much of this region shares borders with many of our neighboring countries, and sometimes these borders are not demarcated. There are different perceptions of where the borders lie. So there are ongoing tensions on those borders, and that makes conservation even more challenging in these regions. And snow leopard is a very fascinating species. In part, the fascination is also due to the fact that it's extremely rare. It's a majestically beautiful cat, and perhaps one of the most enigmatic amongst the big cats. From the studies that have happened, typically snow leopard densities in an area are about 1 per 100 square kilometers. So that will give you some idea of how rare this species is. So in fact, people, especially the pastoral people, the local people, the people who depend on livestock, and there are different kind of pastoral communities. You have nomadic pastoral people, you have transhumans, you also have agro-pastoral people. The point I want to make it that many of the people have spent their lifetimes living right there in those habitats, being outdoors for a larger part of their life. A majority of even those people have not have had a glimpse of a snow leopard. Very well camouflaged. In fact, it won't be wrong to call it a master of stealth and camouflage. It's perfectly at home, perfectly evolved to live in that kind of terrain, that kind of environment. That's one of the reason. Mainly, it came from the Western notion, but it has caught up now. It's also called as a ghost of the mountain because it's so hard to find and see. And in fact, local communities have many fables and tales about snow leopards, and one of the recurring theme is how easy snow leopards can vanish from your view. The wild prey of snow leopards is mainly comprised of, say, species like blue sheep, uh, the ibex, argali. So these are the main kind of wild ungulate species that snow leopard preys on. It also preys uh, on birds, actually, like the partridges and also marmots, the Himalayan marmot. But those obviously comprise a very small proportion of its diet. It mainly comes from these large-bodied wild ungulates. Uh, but when I said livestock, there is a lot of variation in how much livestock you will find in snow leopard's diet based on the region you are talking about. So there is a clear linkage to the proportion of wild ungulate species and livestock in a region. The larger the proportion of livestock in a region compared to wild ungulates, the higher the dependence of snow leopards on the livestock would be in those parts. So, so in a way, snow leopards are compelled to feed on livestock when their wild ungulate prey is less in numbers, and also it's uh, easier for snow leopards to kill livestock than it is to kill wild ungulates. From a behavior point of view, they have very similar behavior. In fact, very recent genetic studies show that snow leopards are actually very closely related to tigers than any other big cat. So they sort of diverged very closely from in the evolutionary tree, so to say. So they are most closely related, in fact, amongst the big cats. And just like tigers, snow leopards are solitary, and they are an ambush predator. They don't, unlike wolves, they don't chase their prey for long distances. They hide and ambush their prey. And a lot of other behavioral traits are very similar. In fact, the strategy for hunting, and the age at which snow leopards become mature and start breeding. So you will find a lot of similarities between tigers and snow leopards. And interestingly, now in many part of the Himalayas, I mean, it must have been historically there. It's only that we are uncovering more and more evidence now. There are also regions, especially near the tree line, where the growth of trees stops and the typical trans-Himalayan habitat begins. Many of these ecotones or these transition zones, we are also seeing that snow leopards and tigers also sort of share space at times. So you will have overlap between snow leopards and tigers in some of these regions. Um, that's another interesting facet which is being uncovered more and more with more research, more camera traps being used. Uh, in our country, Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh, Himachal Pradesh, and Uttarakhand in the Western Himalayan part. And if you look at the Eastern Himalayas part, then that's comprised of the state of Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh. That's where snow leopards are found in our country. So other countries are Nepal, Uzbekistan, Russia, Mongolia, China, Pakistan, Bhutan, Afghanistan, Kyrgyz Republic, Kazakhstan, and Tajikistan. So there are 12 countries actually overall. So right now what we have is guesstimates. We only have guess about how many snow leopards are there. So for instance, for our country, the snow leopard numbers are thought to be between 400 to 700. So now as we speak, the government of India has initiated a nationwide snow leopard population assessment exercise, and we are a part of that. So in all the states, in all the union territories where snow leopards are found, an effort is underway now to very systematically, in a very robust way, to find out how many snow leopards are there. It's still going to take a couple of years, at least another 1 or 2 years, before we have a good estimate of snow leopard population in our country. But the current guesstimate is between 500 and 700. Worldwide, it's thought to be between 4,000 to 7,000. The problem is, obviously, it's not easy to estimate snow leopard numbers. It's a rare species, it's very elusive. And in addition to that, the kind of habitat and terrain in which snow leopards live, these are remote regions, very rugged kind of terrain, very difficult for humans, for people like us to operate and function there. The difference between say estimating tiger populations and estimating snow leopard populations from the field point of view, like how these two are different. So from my own personal experience, when I was working on tigers, I could, go out on a gypsy or a 4-wheel drive in the morning at 6 a.m., come back by 6 in the evening, and put out about 35 to 40 odd cameras in a single day and cover a pretty large area. But when I started working on snow leopards, and one of my areas of expertise is in fact estimating snow leopard populations. That's one area where I worked extensively. And what I figured out from my own personal experience, from the field point of view, you cannot put out more than 3 cameras in a day because you have to walk everywhere. And walking in these mountains is not easy because you are running out of breath. There is very less oxygen. It's extremely cold out there. And these are mountain systems, not flat. So you are always either climbing up or climbing down. So that makes it extremely challenging. And at the same time, the only way to do snow leopard research in a larger part of snow leopard habitat is to camp out. You're constantly moving camp, so taking care of whole of logistics of camping itself becomes a big task. And sometimes bad weather, extreme weather events, they make your life even more challenging. So it has different kind of challenges when it comes to studies and research. And I think thankfully more and more people are getting interested in these systems. They are picking up research and studies and conservation work in Himalayas. So there is hope. Over 330 million people directly or indirectly depend on the rivers which originate in the snow leopard habitat. So in fact, the mountains of Central Asia, the high mountains of Central Asia, these mountains are also called as the third pole. It's immensely rich in an array of mammalian species, birds, very unique array of plants as well. So it's extremely rich, especially the Eastern Himalayas part is one of the biodiversity hotspots globally. So it's very, very rich in terms of biodiversity. Obviously, the number of species in the Trans-Himalayan region are less compared to the forested parts of the Himalayas, but overall, the Himalayan region is immensely rich in a range of species. And snow leopards are increasingly being referred to as the guardians of these water towers. Snow leopard indeed is an umbrella species for this region, for the entire Central Asian high mountains. And it's a good indicator of health of these ecosystems. So if snow leopards are doing fine, that of course is an indicator of the fact that the ecosystem is functioning well. The processes that define how an ecosystem functions are also doing well, and everything is going to be good for people as well as wildlife. But when snow leopards start declining, I think the impacts may not be visible immediately, but the long-term impacts will be noticeable, and not only noticeable, but of course sort of disastrous for people as well, not only from snow leopard and conservation point of view. So this region has a very old history, in fact, the history which is several millennia old, where pastoral people, the local communities, have primarily depended on livestock rearing for their livelihood. because as I told you earlier, because of the unique environmental or climatic conditions of this ecosystem, it's not possible to grow crops. In fact, the growing season is really short, typically 4 to 5 months, and it's subsistence based. You can only grow a few crops for your own use and for your own consumption, not on a commercial basis. But at the same time, one of the issues, a historical issue rather, when it comes to snow leopard conservation and threats to the species have been conflicts between people and snow leopard over livestock losses. And it's a sort of a vicious cycle in the sense that on the one hand, a very large part of snow leopard diet comes from livestock, especially in areas where the livestock numbers or livestock proportion of livestock in a landscape is far higher than the number of wild ungulates or the wild prey species of the snow leopard. So snow leopards are compelled to rely on livestock in those cases. But when when snow leopards kill more and more livestock, then obviously people whose life and whose livelihood depends on livestock, they do get angry. And many times that leads to what we call as retaliatory or revenge killing of snow leopards. And that's a big issue. In fact, one of the studies that we conducted at a global level found that more than 55% of snow leopard crime, by snow leopard crime, I mean poaching, killing of snow leopards, retaliatory killing, everything combined, more than 55% of snow leopard crime happens due to livestock predation. It's retaliatory in nature. Smuggling and poaching, of course, is an issue, but more than half of it is due to the fact that people seek revenge killing, or they are losing their livestock, so they want to get rid of the problem. So they think the solution could be eliminating a snow leopard, which is causing them problems. So that's more than 50%. Of course, snow leopards are also killed for the international trade and due to demand for their fur, which is exceptionally beautiful, and that's what lands snow leopards in trouble. Their beauty itself becomes a sort of a curse for them. And obviously, there is also demand for the snow leopard bones, especially as a replacement for tiger bones. Because you see, the legislation, the protection for tigers in our country has been improving quite dramatically. And it's becoming more and more harder for poachers to go after a tiger. So snow leopards become, the next target, including leopards also. The common leopard also is suffering due to that issue. This is one threat. But other than that, the issue is that even people like me, conservationists like me, we have been sort of rest assured that these are remote regions, very hard to reach. There is not a great road network. So the very remoteness of these places in the Himalayas make them safe. But that's not true anymore. There is rapid development happening in the Himalayas. There is a lot of focus on building infrastructure. Human population density also is increasing. And in certain parts of the Himalayas, there is also a commercial aspect to livestock production, which kind of disturbs the natural balance. I mean, people would rear livestock for their own use and consumption. But when there's a commercial push for livestock production, then the whole balance changes. And apart from that, habitat destruction, demand for medicinal plants, and now one of the biggest threat, which is sort of a pervasive threat, which affects everything else, is the climate disruption, which we are facing. And that has huge impacts not only on snow leopards and the ecosystem, but also on the people who are living there. Climate change has huge impacts on snow leopards and the entire ecosystem. So in fact, there was a study that by 2070, less than 35% of the current snow leopard habitat would remain as a good habitat or as a refugia for snow leopards. The rest of it is quite sort of going to be badly affected. The glaciers are melting rapidly. In fact, one of the largest and the most beautiful glaciers that we have in our country, called as Barashigri in Himachal, that have itself been receding at a very, very rapid and alarming pace. And you see this commonly across Himalayas now. Glaciers are receding, the snow melting is faster, the glacial lakes are growing and expanding, and there are more and more climatic events which are unexpected, sudden, and disastrous. Those kind of events have increased in frequency over the past couple of years, and at least in the past 2 decades. Tourism is done in a socially responsible, culturally responsible, and ecologically sensitive way. It can bring immense amount of benefits for snow leopard conservation as well as for local communities who share space, who share habitat with snow leopards, and who sort of bear the brunt of conservation efforts. Because if conservation efforts are going well and if snow leopards are doing fine, uh, and people continue to suffer, say, livestock predation because of snow leopards. So, in one sense, if you think about that, so these local communities are actually subsidizing snow leopard conservation, right? Because snow leopards are getting their food from their livestock to some extent. So I think if tourism is able to bring benefits to local people, be culturally sensitive to the the local cultural system that people have, it can bring benefits. But at the same time, obviously, sometimes the greed of making quick money because people want to see snow leopards, and there's a huge demand for that now. And that also leads to negative impacts, which can directly affect snow leopards. For instance, baitings to get a sighting of snow leopard is a clear no-go area. It can have immense impact on the behavior of snow leopards, and it can actually lead to increase in conflict between local people and snow leopards. It also is unethical, of course. At the end of the day, I think it has to be done in a sensitive manner. And also, as you see with tourism, many a times the benefits that come out of tourism do not reach local people, the local communities, right? So in those kind of scenarios, the tourism is not really going to help either people or snow leopards. So it has to be balanced, it has to be regulated, there needs to be a clear policy framework. Also, many of these habitats, as I mentioned, are fragile and they can't take completely unregulated kind of tourism. And you see examples of those even in many remote part of Himalayas. You go on a hike and the trail is littered with packets of Maggie and chips and whatnot. So that itself creates huge amount of damage to these habitats. The littering itself is a huge issue now in the Himalayas as well. So so what I mean is that it has to be done ethically, it has to be regulated, and there needs to be a clear policy framework to manage tourism in the Himalayas. There are extremely diverse cultures across this region, and by and large, people have a very, very positive attitudes towards snow leopards. And I would say they not only tolerate snow leopards, they actually accept snow leopards as a part of their life. And that's in the social fabric of our country, I think, by and large. If you across communities, you will see that people have immense amount of tolerance and even love and reverence for wildlife. Uh, the issue is that when people continue to suffer economic losses or other kind of losses, loss of opportunities, and they do not see that they are being helped, they are not being supported, that's when these issues become problematic. So culturally, of course, you find snow leopards mentioned in a lot of local stories, in local folk tales, even in the religious texts and discourses. So in the Himalayas, in the Indian part, Buddhists are the predominant community, right? So Buddhism is very important, a dominant religion, so to say, in this region. And snow leopards have a very important place in Buddhist texts, in fact. Even if you look at some of the Buddhist structures and monasteries, you will typically see sort of two, at least in the gateways, you will see two white lions kind of statues. They are actually snow leopards. And they are supposed to be guarding the dharma, the spirit. And actually, in the Indian Himalayan region, people refer to snow leopards as the spirit of the mountains. This is when I said the Western idea is to call it as the ghost of the mountain, but in the Indian spiritual tradition, it's the spirit of the mountain, not the ghost of the mountain. And there is a very fascinating story also of how uh, snow leopards played a very important role in spiritual attainment of one of leading figures of Buddhism, which was Milarepa, the Saint Milarepa. He was a tantric Buddhist practice and a very, very important figure in the Buddhism. So in the Buddhist literature, the the qualities or the traits attributed to snow leopards are about a being that dispels darkness and brings light. Okay, so obviously people have a lot of reverence for snow leopards, but then obviously there is a limit to tolerance and reverence when you continue suffering and continue facing losses. And that's what a lot of our work is about. We are focusing on reducing people's livestock losses due to snow leopards, helping them, reduce and minimize their losses, so that there can be greater harmony between people and snow leopards. Or at least I won't say we are creating harmony, but can we maintain the existing harmony that is already there? That itself is important. So that's a large focus of the work that we also do at the moment. Snow leopards and Himalayas, where they are, is a very, very important ecosystem. It's a shared heritage that we have. It's a unique heritage that all of us as citizens of this country have. And Himalayas, obviously, for us as people of this country, do not have only the biodiversity importance or biodiversity significance. It has much larger significance, which has, for some people, it's about adventure. For some people, it's about spiritual journey. For some people, it's about solitude and soul searching and finding your meaning in life, right? And and I think all of us have a duty towards these systems, towards these mountains, to conserve them, to protect them. And it's not necessary for everyone to be a scientist or be a biologist or be a conservationist to contribute to protecting and conserving systems. I think as a responsible citizen, you can do enough to contribute to protect these systems, to be aware of what is going on in these mountains and what kind of activities are harmful for these systems. Even when you go out as a tourist, are you acting in a responsible manner? Are you trying to reduce your footprint and the waste and being respectful towards the local sensitivities and cultures? I think even those things can add immense impact to overall conservation efforts in this region. That's all I would like to say at this point. Thanks.